Well, good afternoon. I'm Robert Rivard, the editor of the San Antonio Report. Welcome to the fourth annual San Antonio City Fest. Our program this year is hybrid. We're both online as we are today, and we also have some in-person events. You can go to sareport.org for details, but I hope we see many of you Friday evening for our art event at Legacy Park downtown, or on the at Confluence Park for our Saturday morning bike ride which will be led by Brendan Gibbons, our senior reporter and the author of the very popular Traillist series. But today we're here to talk about federal stimulus money coming from the state, the sort of extraordinary once-in-a-lifetime opportunity that both the city of San Antonio and Bexar County are facing in how to smartly allocate and invest these funds between now and 2026. And we'll be talking about several buckets of money. In March of 2020, President Trump signed into law the CARES Act, which, by the way, is an acronym for Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act. That was a $2.2 trillion infusion of federal stimulus funds to cities and counties and states. And then exactly 1 year later, President Biden signed into law what we commonly call ARPA, the American Rescue Plan Act, which was a $1.9 trillion bucket of money, federal stimulus funds for city, counties, and states. The state of Texas has $10 billion that the legislature, which is now in special session, should be allocating to cities and counties. So we're very interested in what will come to Bexar County and San Antonio there. And finally, Congress is arm wrestling over a very large multi-trillion-dollar stimulus package, infrastructure, bill that will eventually, if passed, result in more money for the city and the county. So without further ado, let me introduce our two panelists. They really need no introduction, but Erik Walsh is our city manager. He's been with the city of San Antonio since 1994. His career really has been in municipal governance all that time. He's been city manager since March of 2019, Erik, which means you got exactly 1 year in the office before the pandemic hit. So you've been in an extraordinary moment almost ever since you took the job after the retirement of Cheryl Scully. But welcome to the program today. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Bob. Really appreciate it.
And then another person who needs no introduction, Judge Nelson Wolff, Bexar County Judge Nelson Wolff. Nelson, welcome to the program as well. You've been in this position since 2001 for 20 years, reelected 5 times, and just recently announced that your State of the County address that you won't be seeking reelection next year, which is certainly attracting an awful lot of interest and buzz in the community. Judge, I'm not sure if you can hear me. I don't see you on the screen. I think you'll need to activate your video unless Laura Lopez, our events director, can do that herself.
Yeah, I can hear you and I see myself on the screen, so I'm not sure.
Erik, do you see the judge?
Come on there. Yeah, I can hear you.
Well, we're going to proceed. Ahead.
And else I can do here to be on the screen, but I'm here and I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. We can hear you just fine, and hopefully Laura will figure that out while we get going. Let me just give each of you several minutes to talk about the sort of unprecedented situation you find yourself in as a civic leader, managing all these stimulus funds. There, Nelson, you're there now, and I think just for convenience, I hope you're both okay with everybody using first names here and not titles. So.
That's great.
Erik, let me start with you, and then we'll follow with Nelson on how are you managing this unprecedented situation?
Well, Bob, it has been an interesting 18 months, and I think probably, and I met with a group of employees this morning, and I got a similar question from them. I think what's been important for me, and I think probably the organization, is to make sure that we establish a good cadence, and that's difficult to do in times of emergency, but it's actually the most important time you should be doing that. Making sure that we are over communicating, not just with the public, but with our 12,500 employees. Making sure that we're being supportive of all the things that we need to be doing from an organizational standpoint. And to be honest with you, with the judge and the mayor setting that cadence on a daily basis, that really gave everybody in the entire county a clock we could set our watch to with the daily briefings. I think it was important. But as I look back, I probably communicated with more employees more directly in the last year than I did my first year as city manager. And I think I walk away from that more appreciative of the work we do and really understanding how important it is to the community.
Well, Erik, how specifically are you talking with your colleagues about investing the money that has come from Washington, either through Austin or will be coming next year? And this is not going to continue indefinitely. It's unprecedented federal emergency funding, but you do have a long timeline, 5 years to invest it in. You don't want it all to go to Band-Aid spending. You want to invest it smartly to have long-term impacts.
And we've I think we're seeing times at local government that we'll never see again. Hopefully, we never see again. With the CARES Act last year and ARPA, the American Rescue Plan, earlier this year, and from my standpoint, the difference between CARES Act last year, which the $170 million the city received, the goal of that was to put that into production and out the door as soon as possible. That was literally the direction from the federal government. And with ARPA, we've seen a kind of a change. That money has to be committed by 2024 and spent by 2026. The city received just under $330 million, and we used $90 million of that as part of our budget process to recover revenue. And what we did with that $90 million was place it within our organization to help offset expenses and revenue loss in 21, fiscal year 22, and fiscal year 23. So to try to smooth that out. So that leaves us about $220 million. And actually next Wednesday, we'll begin that conversation with the council about what are the options before us. The goal of the local government recovery funds program, the $330 million, was to make sure that local governments can recover revenue loss and deal with immediate needs of COVID. But the Treasury guidelines really are such that they're looking for local governments to ensure that we're dealing with equity-based issues within the community. There's a pretty extensive requirement for community engagement. And Bob, so that I'll give your viewers a little bit of a sneak peek of what the calendar is for us. We're going to lay out kind of the framework to the council next week, and then we anticipate going through community engagement process during the month of November through the beginning of December. We'll give the council an update in December, and then bring them a plan that they can adopt in January. One of the things that we've talked about it a lot with the council, we can't do things like some cities have gone to hire police officers with that money. That's an expense that local government should bear. And one of the things that I'm mindful of is creating some sort of financial cliff if we use this money, and not like the federal government has asked us, and we create a financial situation for us or problem down the road. What I envision is a 3 to 5 year financial plan that will periodically go take the temperature and make sure that we're still aligned. I think we're going to need to take, there are a number of large issues that we started to address in our annual budget, like mental health and domestic violence and some of our housing navigator programs, that we'll want to make sure that we continue that, because we've seen that through the pandemic, those programs are even more important right now. I think we're going to need to deal with the utility expense that SAWS and CPS have been dealing with over the last year. I think we're also going to need to be able to look at we received federal money to offset our COVID-related expenses, whether it's testing or vaccination. That money is going to run out at some point. So these funds are supposed to be looked at with that eye. And we've been approached by some agencies and partners for funding. That's probably that community engagement part we're going to go through in November. But I think we need to be as impactful as possible. Mental health is a huge issue, and I know that the county kind of commissioned a task force that looked at it, and I think where possible, and Judge David and I met yesterday to talk about where are the areas that the city and the county need to line up from an ARPA standpoint, so that we're doing as much as we can for the community together where it makes sense, and making a difference.
Well, thank you, Erik. And Judge, give us your perspective from the county and how you will, operate either parallel or in concert with the city as you both go forward, and give us some of the numbers too of the county's total from the respective stimulus fund acts.
Well, first of all, I think the timeline that Erik set out is a good timeline, and we'll roughly be following that same timeline, I believe, because there's some unanswered questions out there that I think we need to figure out exactly what the state's going to do with that $10 billion I think they've got. And I think the legislature in this session is supposed to make some of those decisions. So that's important to us. Where will that money go? You don't want to duplicate that spending. We're also tracking all the other federal programs that have been approved underneath that, where people can apply directly to those programs and get federal funds in a direct way to them. So what we've done, we started about, I guess, 2 months ago, and we voted on 6 different categories that we would spend money in: economic stability, education access, healthcare, justice system, neighborhood environment, and then social and community support groups. And we allocated a certain percentage to each one of those. We will receive a total of $389 million, but we only got half of that this year. A big chunk of that will go to revenue loss over the 5-year period. Some of that's projected. We know what it was this last year. It was about 50 some odd million, but we don't know for sure what over the next 4 years, how much that will be, if indeed we're projecting 219. So some of those numbers, we won't totally know till as the years pass, but we do know right now that we can allocate 123 million in funds that we've got right now. We started that project somewhat through the budget year, already allocating the majority of our funds that we have approved already to mental health. It's one of the greatest challenges facing us in a general way, and also in our criminal justice system. So we do have this 123 million that we could make decisions on within the next 2-3 months, let's say. But what we did, once we got everything allocated, we went out and we asked for proposals that would fit any one of these 6 different categories. And we got back proposals under each one of those categories. And if you total them all up, I think there's about $500 million in requests, of which we got about 123 million. And we had something like 208 different agencies apply for it. It's a fairly comprehensive application process, stating how they would use it, how does it meet the goals of the Economic Stability Act. How does equity work into it? Are they, double dipping on us? Are they applying for state funds as well as federal funds? And then are they eligible for it? And we have Guidehouse working with us that we hired to go through these and see which ones are eligible for ARPA and which are not. So we're going through that process right now. Staff's getting us all the information. The Commissioner's Court has been furnished with all the preliminary numbers and all the requests from the various groups. And so it's going to be a little challenge to go through that. But I believe that the timeline that Erik was talking about is a pretty good one. So we'll have a little better understanding before we make that commitment, what what the state is doing and what some of these other direct federal programs are doing. There's some things that we know we're not capable of doing that we know are important. Digital access is certainly a major one, and the city has started already working very, very hard on that and have a good plan, and I visit with them several times. But there will be different funding that'll be available for that. I think I would rank that, right at the top of the agenda as far as education goes, being able to have everybody have access to the internet. We know we got a digital divide. It's been a huge problem for us. And so one way or the other, whatever the funding might be, I think that's important to this committee. And I think the city has a pretty good overall grasp of what needs to be done in terms of a backbone of fiber that would be laid throughout the county and the city. We will be allocating more money toward mental health, and we are concerned about the numerous arts groups that are in the community, whether it be the large museums, whether it be the smaller arts organizations. We have a proposal from I think 49 of them that have got together and made a comprehensive proposal to the county. We'll be reviewing that. I believe that we will try to stagger those commitments out over the 5-year period, so we know we at least got some sustainability, at least for the 5-year period, that you don't give a group X dollars and then the next year they don't have it and they're right back where they started from. So we're trying to look at a 5-year time frame. You got, I think, 3 years to make the commitments and 5 years to spend it. So it's a complicated process, one that we're struggling with, and the picture, I think, will become a little clearer as we reach the end of the year and as we begin to take up some of these issues.
Nelson, Erik mentioned some public engagement that will occur in the coming months as the city looks at some of its potential targets for investment. Will we be able to see those 208 applications for the 500 million, or will there be some?
They're all public record. I don't think there's any way we can listen to all 208. And so we're trying to come up with a process how we kind of narrow that down from the staff perspective, from also determining whether they do have other sources of revenue that they're using or whether they do apply for it, trying to get those mechanics down straight. And then we've got to decide among the commissioners court, which ones do we really want a full presentation on, and which ones that we would want to consider funding and what level we would consider it. We haven't reached that point of how we would develop that yet, but we believe that, there's internal money now spent. I don't want to overlook that. We have spent money addressing some of the mental health needs. We have spent some of the money addressing our employee needs. We have a pretty good incentive program of $1,000 up for their insurance payments for the year 2021 if they have got vaccinated. By the way, that they have till October the 15th. They don't have much longer to get it done if they're going to be eligible for that. I think we've already had about, 2,500, 3,000 that have sent in their deal for that. So there are some things that we've done internally in our criminal justice system, things that we do directly on our mental health.
Well, I want to talk about mental health more, and I want to talk about the arts more, but let's go to the digital divide first. Erik, we recently published an article on the launch of the nonprofit San Antonio Digital Connects and their roadmap, as they called it, for overcoming the digital divide. They put a $600 million figure on what the ultimate cost would be for San Antonio and Bexar County to accomplish that. I wonder whether or not that seemed like a realistic figure to you, and if so, how you hope the city proceeds on that front.
Bob, that effort and that plan, really in coordination with the private sector and the city and the county, contributed to that. The idea was that we want to be prepared for whatever comes out of the federal government or the state government in terms of broadband and digital divide dollars, and making sure that we're prepared beyond just from a classroom standpoint, because we saw that exasperated in the spring of 2020 and then through the school year 2020 and 2021. But how it impacts employers, and the mayor has talked about digital access as almost a public utility. The reality is that under state law and partially federal law, the telecom providers, that is their purview. So, I mean, anything that we do, we're going to need to be able to work through with the telecommunication providers, the AT&Ts, the Spectrums, because the reality is that I'm not sure that government can do it all. I do think that puts us in a better position and probably exemplifies what the judge was just talking about. There are a lot of opportunities right now at the federal and state level. And I think one thing that I need to constantly remind myself, and I think it's good for the public to know, that unlike most major cities and urban areas, the city and the county work pretty well together. And that's really important when you go to Austin or you go to Washington, D.C., because the production of money and the opportunities, the federal government is going to look for who's got a plan and who can implement it. And I think the stand-up, the hiring of Marina, and making sure that we've got a focused effort. Frankly, we added a position within our city organization this year's budget to be our point on broadband. We added legal resources because we know we're going to need to tackle that at an intergovernmental standpoint. And we did set aside $27 million in our original recovery and resiliency plan last summer to help connect 32 neighborhoods where the school districts were having the most trouble staying connected to the kids. And that project is continuing. And will be done later on this year, and it really builds upon our existing infrastructure. But I think the better off we are locally organized, the higher up on the pecking order will be when it comes time to federal or state resources.
Judge, anything on the subject of the digital divide and the county's role in working with the city?
Well, I think Erik explained it very well. We did a small program out south of town where we hooked up a Wi-Fi. I think it was in Southside Independent School District, and we were able to reach quite a few students that connected directly to the school. But that's really not the final answer. It's very difficult to do it that way, and we spent money on it, and it was successful to some extent. But really, I think the only way you can really tackle the issue is, I guess, what would you call the fiber backbone? I would guess would be the right way to say that. And then you do have to deal with. You may have the fiber background, but then you do got to get hooked up to it, and you got to pay somebody for that service. And then the question becomes, in some of the lower income areas, do you subsidize that some? So we know that's a top priority of the Biden administration. We think the state would also consider it. So it's going to take a lot of federal funds and state funds to augment whatever may be done at the level. But I believe the city has a better ability and understands that better. I've met with their team, and I'm impressed with the work that they've been doing. And I think they've got a pretty good outline of what ought to be done. And we'll work together on that. If we have to provide some funding, I think we're willing to do that too.
The situation for many of the arts organizations, nonprofit arts organizations, that they saw a pretty steep decline in donations and membership as more and more philanthropic dollars were devoted to COVID-related relief, the food bank, Haven for Hope, other entities. And so you did talk about directing some of that funding to the arts, Nelson. And I guess I would ask both of you, and you've both been, both the city and county have been longtime supporters of the San Antonio Symphony. We obviously have a major city-county investment in the Tobin Center for the Performing Arts. do you see the symphony being saved in the next year, or is that situation beyond the scope of the city or county to do something transformative there?
I've been involved in this for the last 30 years, I guess, going back to the city council and then as mayor. And I've seen, I don't know, I guess 3 or 4 different times where the symphony's gone dark and they can't quite raise the money that's needed to do. They know what they're capable of raising, and it's somewhere in the neighborhood about $5 or $6 million a year. I think the symphony costs under the existing contract where they're working now is closer to $8 million. The mayor and I have talked about it several times. We don't have an answer for it yet. I think it would take a little bit more of a partnership than just the city and the county. I don't know what we're willing to do at this time, but we have been talking about it, whether it's, contingent on private donations stepping up, or whether maybe there's some possibility. I haven't explored this yet, but some possibility with the UTSA musical program that they have is a pretty strong, vibrant one. I believe Austin does that with the University of Texas. They don't have a full-time orchestra there either. And so there may be a way to patch together some partnerships that will sustain it. I mean, I'd love to be able to keep it at a 73 member orchestra, but it's going to take a strong partnership with other entities other than just the city and the county to make it happen.
Erik, any perspective on that?
Yeah, Bob, and probably from a broader perspective, I think there's been a lot of conversation over the last 18 months, especially because of the impact of the arts programs. I think it's at a certain point we're all going to have a larger conversation about the general support of our cultural programs, our arts programs, and how they're funded. And not just an individual program. I mean, this has been a topic of discussion even pre-pandemic for the city council, and there is a strong desire to enhance the funding for those programs and the expansion, and make sure that they're tied to Visit San Antonio and our tourism aspects. But at the end of the day, I think we're all going to eventually have to prioritize the funding, right? There's a lot of need in a lot of different areas. And if this is going to be arts and cultural programming and the symphony and orchestra and local artists, then we're going to need to make it a priority long term. It can't be, and the judge is right. I mean, I've been around a long time too. And, every 4 or 5 years, there's a resurgence of some of these issues. It gets fixed. And then we're back in the same spot. So how do we fix this long term? It would be great it's a dream, it's a pipe dream, but it's almost like there needs to be a permanent, massive endowment set aside. But that's easier said than done. And it does, I think the judge is absolutely right. I think it involves more than just the city and the county to be able to support that. I'll say that it was a big priority for the council in this 2022 budget. And part of the recovery dollars that we use to really help smooth out the massive revenue loss in our hotel occupancy tax, we did that in this year's budget with ARPA dollars. And one of the beneficiaries was to get our arts programming back to 2019 funding levels, because they had been severely cut last year. That's the one part of our business that continues to struggle and took some pretty hard hits over the last 18 months.
You bring up the convention and visitor business, and here we are meeting remotely, and we're all seeing the continuing debate over companies asking employees to return, but in a very different world. I know both the city and county are looking at hybrid work situations. Do you anticipate the convention and visitor industry fully recovering in our city? Or do you think that the changes that are underway in people's work and lifestyle balance will mean that we're going to have to take a very hard look at sector of our economy going forward?
No, I think it's going to recover. It may take a little bit of time. I mean, I think we saw what happened last April, May, June. There was a lot of pent-up demand. There was a rush at the convention center in the Alamo Dome to nail down dates because this pent-up demand over the last year, it eased off a bit as we went from July to here about a month ago. And until we get those peaks and valleys under control, I think we're going to continue to see movement towards back to what it was before. I think it may look a little bit differently. Some of these larger conventions may want an avenue to do to have people connect like we're connected today. But I think there's a lot of value in people gathering, and I think organizations and associations see that value. I think what we're going to have to struggle with is making sure that we're providing safe facilities. It may be a little bit of a red herring, but I think actions that the state may take, we're hearing indirectly impact potential decisions of groups meeting in Texas. And we're going to need to weather that and work closely with Visit San Antonio. But I have no doubt that it'll come back. It just may take a little bit of time.
I want to ask you both about your respective processes for funding capital investments through the sale of bonds. Quite a bit of publicity, Erik, of late of the $1.2 billion bond the city will launch for the next 5-year cycle, 2022 to 2027. I think your public works director made the remark in a recent city council briefing that there's probably $6.8 billion worth of projects on the ask list. So obviously there's a very difficult process to go through, which will ultimately lead to you going to voters, asking them to approve various funding initiatives in multiple categories. And I want you to just talk about how are you going to manage that parallel with this same process you just described between now and January for public engagement and staff work on the stimulus funding. And Judge, when Erik hands it back to you, the county, it seems to me, uses certificate of obligations more often in its bonding process, doesn't necessarily go to voters, but what's your bonding capacity going forward and how that will impact everything we're talking about? But Erik, let's take it away first with your process.
Yeah, and actually we're going to be talking to the council this afternoon in our B session about the bond program. So the city does bond programs every 5 years, and the next one we're lining up to go back to the voters in May of 2022, and it'll be our largest bond program at $1.2 billion. The financial assumptions that we have historically used is that we conservatively estimate growth in value and no change in the tax rate. So what is it that we can afford? And that's how we came to the $1.2 billion. Bob, you're right. It's $6 billion worth of infrastructure need. And so the process we're going to undertake is really a lot similar to the ARPA process, to be honest with you. And it should be, frankly, because like ARPA, that has a 3 to 5 year time frame, this is our 5-year capital infrastructure plan. Whether it is basic infrastructure like streets and drainage, whether it is the issues of connectivity or resiliency, how we maintain our facilities, which I'll say that the city hasn't done a very good job of in the past, how we add and create new facilities, and how we add to our park system and those attributes that probably have been more utilized over the last 18 months than ever before. There are some commitments that we talked about publicly last year when the council dedicated the sales tax increment to the Ready to Work program. How are we going to continue the Edwards Aquifer Protection Program and the further development of our Linear Creek system? We figured out how to do the Edwards program and we put that in place going forward. But we said we would address Linear Creeks as part of the bond program. So that's going to be a big part of this afternoon's conversation. Once the council kind of sets the foundation today, actually, is the due date. The council members will all be selecting 3 community members for each of our major categories: streets, drainage, parks, facilities, housing. And from the last week of October through the second week in December, we're going to have a series of citizen bond committee meetings, and they'll review the lists and make a eventual recommendation back to council in January. The council will adopt that program and make any adjustments that they want. And then they'll call for the vote by February 3rd, 2022 for May. So we have a long process ahead of us, and it's critical. And one of the things we talked about with council 2 weeks ago was, how do we line up and leverage other funding opportunities like city-initiated TERS or our stormwater program, where we cash and pay-as-you-go capital programs. We need to leverage all those things up, because with $6 billion worth of need, we need to make sure that everything we do is lined up, because we can't do it all, right? We can't do it all in 5 years. Even if we had $6 billion, part of our commitment to the voters is that by the time you go back in May of 2027 to the ballot, 97% of the projects will either be done or under construction. So it's, what can we get done over 5 years? And it's to all of our benefit and the community's benefit to make sure that we're adhering to the same principles, whether they're ARPA or our capital program or frankly our annual budget. And in my mind, if we've got the same priorities and we keep them in front of us, then we'll eventually continue to make some progress in those areas.
Judge Wolff?
Yeah. Well, we did adopt in the budget, I think it was around $617 million in capital projects that will be done over the next 10 years using certificates of obligation. We did that back in 2008 when we did the $500 million flood control plan. Over the 10 years after we did that, we completed all the projects, and it gave us some ability. As during that 10-year period, if a project was proposed on it, turned out not to be economically feasible, or we couldn't get the right of ways, then you could substitute something else for it. So that's a little bit of advantage doing this way. Some of the all of the $617 million has been talked about for quite a long time. You may remember when there was a change with the city and in terms of the allocation of funding for creeks and for aquifer protection. We stated we would do $240 million in creek improvements. And I believe about 80 some odd million of that was extracted from the city that they'd had in their long-term plan. And then with the balance of it being plans that we have developed with the San Antonio River Authority over a long period of time. So out of that $617 million, I think it's about $240 million will go to the creeks. That's water quality, that's trails, and landscaping. So that's a big part of our project. The other is plans that we've had in place for years on our road and highway infrastructure needs and our flood control projects that have evolved. I think that probably totals up to be about $240 million, I guess, between them. And then we've had a parks master plan that we have never addressed. And so we're putting that in the bond project that's been developed with public input over a long period of time. And that's about $75 million. So we will be making some decisions relatively soon, which projects out of those that we will start up in this coming calendar year. I think there's about 9 of them that are being proposed to get started this year. So those projects will go forward. Now, there's one other category of funding. As you know, we went to the voters on the hotel motel tax that paid for sports complexes and paid for the Tobin Center and the river and several others. We don't have the capacity that we had back when we did that, but we may have a little capacity that we could go to the voters on maybe in November, a year from now, to address some needs that are particularly in amateur sports complexes. I talked with San Antonio sports folks the other day, and they certainly have a need for ball fields, soccer fields. I know that UTSA has a plan for the expansion of their sports facilities. So does Texas A&M. So there's a possibility that we could do that. I don't know yet what the feeling of the court would be, but that's a possibility also.
The Greenway Trail system, I would argue, is probably the most underappreciated asset in the city. We're up to 82 miles now of trails along the creek system and the river. And I saw one working document, Erik, that said if we wanted to build out from the 82 miles that we're at today to the ultimate 130-mile goal of the system, it would take $200 million. Is that a realistic amount of work to get done in 5 years, or is that beyond the scope of the 5-year bond to fund at that level and get that much work done?
Yeah, it's probably too much over 5 years, but that's an important point, Bob. So out of the system that's built now, and then you take into consideration the $83 million the judge just talked about that the county's going to fund over the next 10 years, that leaves $200 million to complete. And so we also have, Activate SA, which is a local nonprofit that has spent a good deal of time not only looking to how we connect the creekways through waterways, but also surface streets. And it's kind of like the spokes of the hub that we're working closely with. We also have a $25 million grant with the federal government right now to build out. So, I mean, I think you'll see this afternoon in the presentation that we'll make to the council that we're trying to take as big a bite out of that remaining amount so that, at least in my mind, we do it over the same 10-year period that the judge is talking about. We just do it in 2 bond increments.
Well, and when we talk about connectivity and resiliency, I think one of the things we've learned in the pandemic is that a lot more people are on bicycles. Pedestrian safety has been a long-running issue in our city and county. And Activate SA, the nonprofit Velocity Texas, which has basically taken the work being previously done in the Texas Research Park, and they've made a huge investment on the Near East Side. They proposed bond programs for East Commerce Street, East Houston Street, Nolan Street. So you're getting a lot of exciting transformative projects, I think, being put on the drawing board by these organizations. And I wonder whether or not you see in the next 5 years, both in the city, but outside the city limits too, Judge, in the county, seeing more attention paid to safe multimodal options for residents.
Oh, no doubt. I think we set aside more money in our annual budget this year for Vision Zero type of improvements. I think the bond program gives us a good opportunity to make a dent. I think our challenge is going to be we cannot rely upon a 5-year bond program to solve everything. We're going to have to be creative in terms of dedicating other additional resources. I think we're trying to do that through leveraging our city-initiated TERS to address some major infrastructure improvements. And not have to rely upon the bond program, because remember, from the city's over 500 square miles, and we've got basic infrastructure needs throughout the city, all sides of town. In some areas of town that have not had the investment or have been historically distant, not invested in, we're still playing catch up, and those things at the end of the day. Really, I think we're going to rely upon the council input is key, and the help of the prioritization, and then the citizens reviewing these projects at the bond committee level to really frame it for the voters next May.
Bob, I'll say about the outlying areas of the city. As you know, there's 26 other municipal cities, and often within those 26 other cities, they'll make application for us for some bike lanes also. But I do want to point out that the investment we're making in the creeks that connect to this to the city and then spin it on out in the county, we'll have 32 more miles of trails and bikeways along the creeks in those areas. It's going to be a huge lineal expansion of the ability of people to jog, to walk, to bike along the creekways and along the San Antonio River.
Yeah, no, it's an impressive system, and it seems like an asset the city and county together have built that ought to be become better known around the country. It's really national class, and it's something, it seems to me, that Visit San Antonio should get its arms around and explain to people that there's wonderful recreational opportunities in the city that didn't exist all that many years ago. But we're really one gigantic linear park now along not just our river, but also our creek system, and it continues to grow.
You know, I think that's so overlooked so much, and I think even the citizens don't know how much we've got there. And I certainly believe that in the advertising of San Antonio, that it needs to be talked about more, you know, particularly our missions and how they all connect, because culture tourists and people that care about the environment, they're going to come in, they're going to spend a lot more money here also than the guy that's just going to drink margaritas down on the river. So I think more.
But Judge, that's okay. If they want to come drink margaritas on the river, they can do that too. We'll stay in a hotel room, and so we'll be fine. Hey, Bob. You know, the one thing, and the judge just said it, and I think it's important to reinforce. And it's you know, we're setting apart. It's been 10 years since we updated our bike master plan, and you know, the city's never really looked at the Creekway, the linear Greenway trail system as a transport. It's been more of a recreation asset. But as we look at that, and Tamika Monterville, our new transportation, well, she's not new anymore, but our transportation director, you know, and working with groups like Activate SA, that how do we incorporating the street network to connect the linear creeks so that people have a pathway across, so that you're not having to follow the Salado all the way to a point over, but kind of reimagining how that network should grow over time. And then this really probably runs beyond our 5-year program or 5-year capital program. But I think it opens a lot of doors when we look at it differently, not just as a recreational asset.
Well, while we're on the subject of transportation, I know neither of you have direct responsibility for Via Metropolitan Transit, but I want to talk to you a little bit about what we've seen about public transportation during the pandemic, the needs of our working class families, and the very difficult question of how do we find a funding mechanism. As you said, Erik, the 5-year bond cycle is not the ideal platform or vehicle to fund everything. There are some long-term strategic needs in our community. We had the mayors of various Texas cities on an earlier program today, and Mayor Steve Adler from Austin was talking about the advances they've made with light rail in that city, the plans to tunnel through downtown, and the federal funds that come with these transportation projects that Houston, Dallas, and Austin have availed themselves of. I wonder what your thoughts are about what long-term solutions we can move toward beyond the 1/8 cent sales tax that VIA will start to benefit from 5 years from now, to really find a way to become a better funded transit system and avail ourselves of some of those federal matching dollars they're going to be out there in the new infrastructure bill in all likelihood.
Yeah. You know, Rod Sanchez, one of the assistant city managers, and I met with Jeff and some of his leadership team earlier this week, just to kind of get an update on what their plans are. And there are a lot of federal opportunities. You know, I think for too long, and both of you gentlemen know this because you've been involved for a very long time, there needs to be a greater priority placed, if that's what we choose, for a revenue source. I mean, forget about our 1/8 sales tax increments for a second. For the longest period of time, the sales tax dedicated towards VIA has been at a detriment to Dallas and Houston. And I'm not sure if Austin is the right model, because what Austin did was they dedicated a property tax increase to Cap Metro. And I'm not sure that's the right way of going about doing it. That'd probably be debatable. But, I think from a legislative standpoint, having the state give local leaders, whether it's commissioners court or the city council, the ability to decide whether or not there needs to be a leveling of playing field from a sales tax perspective from VIA would give them the certainty long-term they need to figure out financing, plans, services, operations. And they're always, because it's been designed that way, they're always chasing, and we need to put them on a different footing. That's my perspective.
And Judge, you mentioned earlier the 26 municipalities in Bexar County, and many of them are very much outlying communities where I would just think improved bus service would be a real asset.
I hate to use the term bus. That's all we've ever done is bus. Every time we've tried to go with a rail project, we've got shot down, whether it's light rail or the starter system with streetcars that would tie to light rail. We've got shot down. So I think that's probably off the table. I think we can probably forget about that. Bang your head into the wall so many times without getting mentally screwed up. So I think we've got to concentrate on a couple of things. I like a multimodal model. I don't think we've done near the job that we should be doing on that. They had a successful program, I believe it's up northeast, where they don't run those big buses through the neighborhood. They use vans where they pick up people. They use Uber. They take them to a site if they need to connect to a longer term bus. I'd like to see more of those choices within the city. I know they have some plans for it. I don't know what they're doing about it. But to me, that is a cost-effective way to do it. They said that they actually saved money by using that model in that large area out there in northeast part of town. So I'd like to see some more innovative thinking. Private sector is, constantly looking at ways to move people around. We've seen that with Uber. You've seen it with Lyft. You see it with the proposal now to do a tunnel all the way to downtown for joint rides. You see that with many of the rental vehicles now with vans. So I just think VIA needs to be more innovative in doing things like that are not really high cost. It ought to be a damn bike where you can connect to for that last mile. There's so many things they could do that are not expensive. And I think they need to concentrate on that. The mayor did get out and campaign for them, got them some extra money that they will be getting within the next 3 or 4 years. I think that's important. The state has stepped up and did some high occupancy lanes. You can go down IH10 now that a bus can buzz down. You can go down 281 also that a bus can buzz down. I think VIA's built a terminal out there by 281, and I think they have one proposed on IH10 also. So those are, quick lanes you can go down and move very quickly. But I just don't think we've done enough innovatively to think of ourselves as a private way a private company would think. Get beyond the bounds, and there's going to be less people moving around with many of them staying home. We think a third of our workforce will probably work from home, at least intermittently. And we're setting it up for that to happen. So I just think they need to be more innovative and do things that are beyond just running that big bus and all over the place. It's my view.
Well, our hour is gone by very quickly, too quickly. And I wanted to ask one last question of each of you, and that's just about what leadership has been like in the pandemic and how that's changed you. And Erik, you're in the beginning of your term as city manager in your second or third year. Nelson, you're you can see on the horizon the end to a very, very long and eventful public service career. So I thought I would just ask each of you just to muse out loud a little bit about what it's been like to be in a leadership position through the pandemic and how that's informed your outlook going forward. Erik, I'll start with you.
I got to hang around with the judge more often. Bob, I think it's given me the appreciation of what it means to be focused and prioritized, and frankly, the leadership qualities that are needed to really run an organization. And I think I probably was. If you asked pre-pandemic, Erik, I think I would have said that I was perfectly capable of doing that. But I think the last 18 months have it's clarified for me why it's important to communicate to 12,000 employees constantly, and make sure that they understand. Most of our employees were not remote work employees. They needed to pick up the garbage and operate the airport and report to the substation. And so, everything that we did, I would say that I'm probably have a better appreciation of the need to communicate and how we communicate to the public, and what engagement really means, both internally and externally. But there's some days I kind of think back, and the last 18 months feel like 18 years. But most of the time, it feels like 18 seconds. And I think that's when you remember the stuff that's good and take lessons from the stuff that didn't go well, and learn from them.
Well said. Judge Wolff?
Well, it's I think yesterday, we've had our 500th daily situation report that we plow through every day. I think we've had over 400 and some odd joint calls together every day with Erik and David Smith and health officials, Mayor and I. And I think the Mayor and I have done over 311 media briefings. So we've been about as open as anybody could possibly be. And I think we've been on the page together all the way through this. So if I were looking post-pandemic, and I believe we're headed there, I really, really do. I think there's going to be some, changes in the way we live. I mean, we already talked about it. More and more people are going to be working remotely, going to be less office space used. I think that gives the opportunity for families to get a greater bond with each other. And I think that can be very, very good long-term. Save a family a ton of money, not having to pay child support and transportation and parking and everything else that goes along with that. And so I think that's a lifestyle change that we're going to be seeing. I believe, like Erik says, our convention business will come back, but I think business travel is going to be changed. So many times the business will have to make a decision. Is this a better way to communicate, or should we get on a plane and fly somewhere? So business travel, I think, is going to change. I think we've seen the very, very bad part of the pandemic, where social media has exploded and hate and tremendous misinformation is spewed out all over the internet. It just seems like it's gained traction during the pandemic because the mental anxiety that people had already. And I must say, I could attribute a lot of that to former President Trump. That's just put a poison pill in a large segment of our society. That's I don't think it's going to go away. I've seen it firsthand now a couple of different times, and that's one of the sad part. I believe we are left with some, and that's why we've concentrated on mental health so much to address those issues. I think you're going to see, hopefully, a term that we will look at vaccinations in the way that we've looked at all the others for years and years. That it's going to, if we have these things, it's going to be mandatory to do it. I think we're going to be ahead of the curve in the next pandemic if we follow what we learned. And I must tell you, if they would just listen to local officials and local health officials instead of the demagoguing that we hear at the state and at the national level, we can come up with a good plan for the next pandemic. If we can get people elected that that maybe are liberal or conservative, either one, but they're not crazy. So, I think we'll work our way through it. I think we have a chance to have a better society.
Well, thank you for summing that up, Judge. And we certainly hope that you can go to the grocery store in the coming year without somebody chasing you out into the parking lot, filming you for TikTok or something. Look, the hour is up. I want to thank both of you for your leadership and for your time today and for participating in City Fest and the City of San Antonio. Erik, you've been our lead sponsor this year, and Bexar County Judge is one of our engagement and innovative sponsors. I thank you for that. And thanks to all of our sponsors, because we make all of our content, whether we're meeting in person or whether we're on the web, free thanks to our sponsors. And we'll try to keep up with both the city and the county in the ensuing months as they tackle both their bond projects and how they are going to allocate these federal stimulus funds to the many organizations and needs in the community. So I think you'll want to stay in touch with us at the San Antonio Report. And if you're a reader but not a member, I hope you'll take the next step and become a supporting donor for as little as $25 a year. Actually, if you're a student or somebody on a very limited budget, you can be a supporting member, and that's what underwrites our journalism. My colleague Jackie Wang was on a program earlier today that will be available for if you missed it on YouTube and Facebook, meeting with Mayor Ron Nierenberg here and the mayors of Fort Worth and Austin. And later today, Iris Dimmick, our senior reporter Iris Dimmick, will moderate a panel on public health featuring leaders from the San Antonio Police Department, the San Antonio Clubhouse, Metro Health, and Bexar County, and that will be on later today. You can just go to sanantonioreport.org and look at the City Fest schedule. I hope we're going to see some of you Friday evening at Legacy Park for our arts and poetry event. Again, that's free. There'll be beverages and food. And then Saturday morning, we'll be meeting at Confluence Park for the bike ride down to Elmendorf Lake and back. So we'll see you then. Thank you for reading. Thank you for joining us today. And thank you for your support of the San Antonio Report. Have a good day.